listening to the Money Monopolizers podcast, helping you take control of your financial destiny. It's about time that we invest more in our financial literacy and work towards building generational wealth. If you think you're ready to do the same, then you've come to the right place. Alex, Marlon, y'all ready? Let's get this bread.
What's good, everybody? Alex Camuno here, and we are back with episode 22 of the Money Monopolizers podcast. Before we get into this episode, I do want to make an announcement. We will be in Grand Rapids, Michigan on November 16th, which if you're listening to this on Thursday, the day it comes out, that's in 2 days from now. So we're going to be there at the Amway Grand Plaza giving a workshop on financial literacy. So that's going to be at 2 p.m. If you're there, come check us out and, come, learn something. You never know. If you might or you might not. Hopefully you will, though. But anyways, let's get into this episode. Marlon, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing really good. Like he said, we'll be in Amway Grand Plaza in Michigan at 2 p.m. For the NSBE conference that's going on. So if y'all want to come check us out, for sure, be there to come learn something from us. But I do want to get into this episode because this was a very good one. We interviewed Krystal Dillard, also known as Krystal Financial Friend on Instagram. She has a great and powerful story of how she went from having payday loans to having an overall net worth of $120,000. And she's house hacking. She's doing a lot of great financial things that is going to propel her financial future. And I think she has a lot of stuff that she's going to share with you that you can learn from. So I really hope y'all have a pen and paper out because you're going to have a lot of notes you're taking on this episode. What about you, bro?
Facts. Yeah, this was a great interview. Low-key, I mean, I don't like to rank them, but, this one was up there. So definitely tune in for this. I mean, it's probably the best one. I ain't even going to lie. This is probably the best interview we did. But, definitely listen out for whenever she starts talking about, actionable steps for y'all to be taken to pay down debt if you do have a significant amount of debt. She's, giving out jewelry here today. So y'all definitely pay attention to that. And let's get right into it.
All right, so we are here with Krystal Dillard. She's one of the advocates for the F.I.R.E. movement, Financial Independence, Retire Early. We have a special interview for that we think is going to be very impactful for a lot of our listeners today. So without further ado, so Krystal, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your upbringing with money, and how you have changed in your mindset about it to today. Just give us a general overview.
Just a general overview. So so I'm Krystal. And I am Krystal Financial Friend on Instagram. And I really didn't grow up with a lot of money. So I grew up with parents who really struggled. I did have two parents, but we had our struggles. There was a lot of addiction in the home, mental illness, those kinds of things. And so financials were just all about, making ends meet. And growing up in Los Angeles, it was always about apartment living. I really didn't know anything about home ownership. It wasn't something that always seemed like those other people. Those other people had homes, but it wasn't me. You know what I mean? And I knew Black people who had homes, but it wasn't me, or people who lived like me or had families like me. So growing up like that, and then going off to college, getting an education, and, your financial circumstances change. But I found that my mindset really hadn't changed very much. I still had a lot of limiting beliefs about what was for me versus what was for everybody else, pretty much. And so when I got married, I did end up marrying someone who was from Philadelphia, and he grew up with, all his people were homeowners, and home ownership, I think, in Los Angeles and in Philadelphia are pretty much two different things. But certainly even in Los Angeles, with us being a 2-income household, to him, like, that was one of the first things that, we were a little bit older getting married, that he had, like, we need to get married, and we need to buy a home. And him buying a home actually was something he wanted to do before we got married, which that was one of our first big arguments. So, do you get married and finance a wedding, or do you buy a home? And we argued about that. But one of the things I like about our relationship is even if we argue about things, we're able to really hear what the other person is saying and then make reasonable decisions together. And in the end, I think he was right. And so we bought our home and we actually got married in our backyard, which was one of our first, we paid $5,000 for our wedding, did it all ourselves. And we didn't have to go into debt for a wedding. And I think that was sort of the beginning of who we've become as a couple, which is, frugal and wanting to have a certain kind of lifestyle and being willing to sacrifice for that. So that's sort of our background story, and a little bit more to like how I got here where I am right now is about a year and a half ago, I noticed that, having moved to Philadelphia, we were sort of struggling to financially get everything organized and feel like we really knew where everything was happening with our money, which is not something that I was used to. I was very organized about my money. I knew where everything was. And so I actually invested in some financial coaching from Nasima, who's at Financially Intentional, who is also someone who is a fan of the FIRE movement and has had lots of personal success herself. So I took her e-course. And in taking her e-course, that came with coaching. And I'm going to be honest with you, it has completely changed my life, like completely changed our life. And it was all about realizing how easy it was to make certain small tweaks. They weren't small tweaks. They were huge decisions. But in doing them, they were not that major to make in our life. And with some coaching, we became debt-free. We realized that the home that we were holding on to in Los Angeles, that we were renting out, that if we were to sell that, we could make quite a bit of profit, which would allow us to get to that debt-free sooner. And then learning about the FIRE movement and realizing that, once we eliminated our debt, if we just took the money that was going towards debt and put that towards investing and saving, all of a sudden we're looking at retiring early. And from there, once we got on that train, we started learning more about investment property, which was something that I think the two of us felt even more security in, investment properties, even as opposed to, watching our money grow in investment accounts. So, we made the decision that we wanted to get into investment properties. We just right now, I'm living in our first house hack that we have. We bought a duplex and our tenants feel like we're doing it. You know what I mean? We save 50% of our income and we have goals together. And I'm just really grateful that we made that decision at a certain point to take a already frugal lifestyle, but really making that decision and realize, we don't know everything. And what would happen if I got some coaching and find out from somebody who actually knows something more than us? How would that change our lives? And I'm just completely surprised, and humbled. So that's who we are.
Great story. I really want to unpack that, a lot of that, especially more so in the beginning, and then we'll work towards kind of where you're at now. But one of the biggest I was wondering when you were talking was, so y'all got married, paid $5,000 cash for the wedding, so you didn't have to finance the wedding at all. Did you have any other debts at the time? Whenever y'all, I guess, right after y'all got married?
I mean, when we got married, we had the only kind of debt we did have was student loan. Both of us had been pretty responsible financially at that point. I had been in debt. I had gotten out of debt. So the one kind of debt we both had when we did get married was student loans. And we didn't want more. And once we became homeowners, that's the other thing. I have to admit that home ownership changed our mindsets, period. Once we became homeowners, we understood that the way we spent our money had huge implications for whatever next steps we wanted in our life. There was something about that down payment and the sacrifices we made to buy a home that made money more real to us. So at that point, we did not want more debt. What we wanted was more savings.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, which is where I think my husband was so wise, to say, because had we have gotten married first before buying that house, I'm pretty sure I would have just been really into all of how I wanted this wedding to be. And I don't know if I would have been as reasonable about the spending. I mean, as it was, and it's really funny because as it is, my husband still feels like we spent too much on that wedding. He really does. He really believes we spent too much on our wedding. And I'm
really
telling him, come on now.
Man, I've heard of some ridiculous weddings, and I would definitely say 5,000 is definitely, on the more conservative end.
No doubt.
But how much was that debt in total?
So in total, this last time around, when we got into the financial coaching and paid off our debt, we had $52,000 in debt, which most of that was student loans more than anything from both of us.
Okay, so y'all didn't have any consumer debt.
We had a little bit of consumer debt, and most of that consumer debt came when we bought our home, paying for things like washer and dryers moving in. We had a store credit card from Sears. So we did have a small amount of consumer debt, less than $10,000. Okay.
You graduated, like you said, with a lot of student loan debt, and it's like almost you were just going to be okay with it, not like paying it down super fast, but just like paying it just in general, like maybe making the minimum payments and stuff like that. But so can you describe a little bit of like what happened that really shifted your mindset in order to say we need to target this debt as soon as possible?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you really took me back. I had to think about that for a minute. So yes, it is true that I had this student loan debt. I was going to be one of those people that was just going to pay the minimums. It wasn't hurting me to pay the minimums. I felt like that debt was a part of my life. The significant mind shift actually came right around this time last year, a little bit later on. But my husband is a government employee, and there was furlough. So furlough came around, which means government employees keep working, but they stop collecting a paycheck. Mm-hmm. And that moment of, he's not going to have income coming in, and we're just going to roll with the income, and we don't know how long this is going to last. The last one we had was actually the longest one in history. Made me realize that we just couldn't afford to be in debt anymore. Because once we eliminated that debt, we're now in a situation that if one of us loses our job, we're okay. So that was really the trigger for me, was the government shutdown, and realizing that, I'm on the hook for all of this debt, when if I could eliminate this, just what that does to my lifestyle is I feel more secure. And I never want to feel that way again. So that really was the turning point.
So because I'm just trying to figure out how you got to kind of where you are and how long it took. So you had $52,000 in debt, and then at that point, how long were you just making, I guess, the minimum payments or whatever payments you were doing before you decided then we need to attack it?
I'm so embarrassed when I think about it. When I look back, I'm like, wow, why wasn't I doing this? I see young people like yourselves, because you guys are a bit younger than me. I'm like, dang, if I could have gotten on this train in my 20s, that would have been so nice. But I didn't. So I was paying my student loans off. I graduated in 2005. So let's just say I've been paying my student loans off since 2005. And there were times along that, that road where, I put them in deferment, or I put them into forbearance. And I just really did not prioritize paying those student loans back. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
The payoff happened. So in terms of the timeline and when it got paid off, all of that I just described with the government shutdown happened, I believe, January of this year. My financial coaching, I had already committed to that right about that same time. It was somewhere in the financial coaching, we together started having big ideas like, what would just happen if we sold our home in Los Angeles? Like, why are we holding on to this? We were renting it at the time. We were not making a profit from renting it. We just were holding on to this home because we loved it so much. But realistically, it was not turning us a profit. So when we made the decision to sell that home, it sold very quickly. We made a significant profit on it because of the unique housing market in Los Angeles. And that the amount of money that we made off the sale of the home allowed us to immediately, in one swoop, pay off those student loans. Wow. And we were happy to do it.
And how much was it at that point that you had to pay off of that?
So it was $52,000 in debt.
Oh, okay. So that was
the $52,000 in debt was both of us together.
total.
So
Okay.
that total together. So when I finished college, I believe I had around $30,000 in debt at that time, which also says something about that debt. You know, I just think about how the treading water of it, how I had barely made a dent. Oh, I get mad when I think about it. Like I was just treading water with that debt, you know. And when I talk to people about student loans now, because people ask me, like, I made a big deal. Once we got debt free and we got out of student loans, I made a really big deal about it. And people have asked me, like, what does it take? And I'll tell you what it takes. It takes not paying minimum payments on student loans. Because those minimum payments will keep you treading water for a very, very long time because of the interest that's involved.
I would think it's like this is a real big takeaway for our audience, because I feel like a lot of people are going to be graduating college soon or already have, and they have accumulated student loan debt. And so now they might be on the same path as what you were at the time. It's just that they want to make minimum payments and start their lifestyle. So, but you are a proponent of, you had like a mindset shift. You had something that tragic that may have happened to you that allowed you to be like, okay, I need to change my mindset from making these minimum payments to getting this debt off my name altogether. So with that, as you start making these payments, I know you said that you had an advantage of being able to pay most of your debt off with your house that you sold in Cali. But for people who are like making these payments for, say, like 12 months at a time, and they see it going down, but they're starting like to get worn out a little bit, what do you say to those people in order to like stay consistent and continue to pay this debt down?
You know, I would really say be willing to sacrifice in the short run for the long run freedom. And so the short run is, if you're making double payments, I feel like what I've discovered is that I make a lot more money than I realize. And if I look at my money that I have and how I'm spending it, it's all about the way that I prioritize that money. And when it comes to those student loans, they're not going to go away. They're not going to go away in 5 years. They're not even going to go away in 10 years. You are the master over your own destiny. And I would encourage people, if they can double the amount that they're putting in there, double the amount. I would encourage that when you come into large sums of money, like your tax return, why won't you pay that towards your debt? And the other thing is, I'm an educator. So one of the things that I had in my mind for a long time was I was going to go get that, that good teaching job in the right neighborhood that was going to allow me to get out of these loans. And that little thing kept me from being aggressive about paying it off. It kept me from also consolidating or refinancing my loan, because I needed to keep it all pure just in case I get in. And I'm going to tell you, the just in case never happened. It's actually pretty hard to get into some of those programs, unfortunately. And the commitment that you have to make to pay you have to stay in those jobs, I want to say 10 years, in order to really get the amount of payoff that they do, kind of use, I think, as a carrot to get you into them. And that some of those jobs, the reason that they know that they can do that is because it's a struggle to stay in certain environments, working in challenging situations for a long time. So anyway, my advice to people is, don't be fooled by the carrots of whatever, programs that people tell you you're going to be able to get into. Don't sit and wait for somebody else's program to get you out of this debt. Start being aggressive about it early on and put as much as you can onto it, instead of some of the other things that I used to do. I used to go on trips, especially before I met my husband. A chunk of money came, I want to go to the Dominican Republic. And I'm not saying, don't live your life. Live your life, enjoy your life. But the truth is that those debts are following you. They are not going away. And the sooner you can pay those off, the more free you can be later to enjoy those trips to the Dominican Republic guilt-free. Come back and your cost of living is low. I mean, that's the sweet spot we're in now, is just that our cost of living is extremely low because we no longer have debt.
And I want to encourage people too to seriously take what she's saying to heart, because essentially what she's saying is delayed gratification, right? And I know Marlon is a big proponent of this. We both are. But it's really imperative to you know, sacrifice now, especially if you're young, sacrifice for a few years, you know, buying a brand new car right out of school, getting the brand new apartment, or getting, you know, new clothes every other month or every other week, like most people do. Delay gratification now so that later you will be able to reap the fruits of that labor. And one thing I think too that happens a lot too, or one thing I have seen is you really are able to still enjoy the things of life while you're, you know, being disciplined and paying down debt and all these things and saving for something. It's just a matter of accounting for that thing that you want in life and planning for that thing. Like you said, you really enjoy taking trips, but see, I know I hear that and say, man, well, then I can't take trips anymore. No, you can take trips. You just have to plan for it and account for it and make sure that's in your budget to do that down that line. The problem is people will come up on some money like a tax return and go take a trip the next month. Why are you doing that? That wasn't never that. If you had not got that money, you would have took that trip.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of delaying gratification now. So
I have to tell you a story. So speaking of, you're really bringing back memories of this. I've had bad financial behavior. I tell people, listen, I am the person who used to do payday loans. I've done payday loans. As crazy as that, yes. And now I look at those numbers. I'm like, what was I doing? You know what I mean? What was I doing? I was a product of my environment where it was okay to do that. People were doing that. I grew up seeing my parents in a pinch do things like that. So it seemed like a good solution at the time. Now I know that, you know, I just can't even imagine behaving that way now. Letting people get that kind of money from me in interest. But you reminded me of a story. So I have not traveled the way I used to travel. So in fact, when we got married, we went to Vegas for our wedding, and we asked for no presents. We had like I forget what it's called, honey fund, where people could put money towards our honeymoon. I mean, we have just been really frugal together. And so we're actually getting ready to go to a trip to Hawaii in about 7 days. I'm in the countdown now.
Ooh,
and this is my first trip. Or it's our first big trip together, but it is my first trip that I actually paid. I saved all my money first. We saved our money first. We completely paid this trip off. There will be no debt incurred from this trip. And that's not the way I used to travel. I remember the last time I traveled to the Dominican Republic. I use that as an example because that's like my trip that reminds me, don't ever behave like that again. Dominican Republic. A friend of mine said, hey, somebody I know canceled at the last minute. Do you want to take over for their trip? You know, everything's 50-50. I went on that trip completely unplanned. And when I came back, I barely knew how I was going to pay my rent when I came back. And I look back at stuff like that, and it's just like, no. Don't be me, please. Please don't be the younger version. You don't have to. But maybe, I mean, for some of us, for me, I feel like I actually had to have all those lessons. That all of that's part of the way I needed to grow up financially to get to a point where nothing is worth not having my rent or mortgage money now. Nothing. Like, it's worth that now. But back then it was, you know.
Okay, so I think it's a fair point to emphasize their upbringing. So you keep mentioning that when you were growing up, you didn't have this same education. You saw payday loans being a common thing, a commonality. So it's like, oh, this is okay for me, like to do in my adult age, until you start realizing certain things are just not the way that you should live your life. So I think your financial coach might have played a big role in that. But what other budgeting tactics have you used that's allowed you to be able to utilize your money the way you want to now versus how you did back then?
It's been a lot of different growth along the way. So even before financial coaching, going way back to the first time, and, you know, I share very openly on my Instagram account that I actually had a problem with alcoholism and had to get sober in my mid-20s. And so with that kind of thing, with having that kind of chaos, and then coming to a place where I no longer wanted to live in chaos and I wanted to find a new way to live, when I actually started that journey, which was about 11 years ago, that was the first time that I ever started doing things like go and get financial books. You know, someone recommended to me, why don't you go get a financial book? And the first thing I ever did to try to change my financial behavior was learn how to live on cash. I got rid of all my credit cards at the time. I got rid of all my even debit cards. I used to just cash my check. I did the cash envelope system. And none of the things that I'm saying are like, these are not new or revolutionary ideas. There's people who do these things and they do them very well and consistently. So the first thing I learned how to do was live on cash. And when I learned to live on cash and have envelopes and systems that allowed me to make sure that I actually had the money, that made more money more real to me. And so that was some of the first things I did to become disciplined with money. I learned how to pay off my debt one payment at a time, kind of early on in that journey. So, I would call up my creditor and say, I'm sorry I was late to pay. I want to make this right. What I have that I can pay right now is $20 a month. And the funny thing about $20 a month is $20 a month eventually will pay off your $1,000 debt. Mm-hmm. And so one at a time, about 11 years ago, I had to truly clean up my financial behavior. And once you do it, and once you do it the hard way, the way where you have to really struggle to do it, you never want to go back to that. Right. So for me, that kind of reality moment of what I had done financially and having to face that and pay that all off has kind of set a foundation for me now where there really is no going back for me in terms of just being involved in debt. My student loans, that was a new shift. That was like the next level of me realizing like, oh, I don't need this debt either. Like I could actually make decisions to not have any of this. But things like consumer debts, once I really faced the wreckage of my past with that, I never wanted to live that way. And I think meeting my husband, I knew that I needed to have a partner who had the same kind of mentality about money that I do. And I feel that in my opinion, I hit the jackpot. In terms of my husband, I hit the jackpot. He is responsible with money. I met him. His credit was good. I was like, oh.
I love it.
He told me when he went to go buy a car one time, they checked his credit twice because they really just did not believe that a young Black man was walking around with 800 credit. But he was, because he was he was raised to be very responsible with his money. And though I wasn't, like I learned to be. And I see myself as the person who had to learn the hard way.
Definitely. Wow, that's amazing. And I want to kind of talk about more about that coaching aspect, because it sounds like, okay, you had like figured it out kind of on your own. Like you went to the school of hard knocks to figure it out. And you kind of, you say you developed the cash envelope and all these different budgeting strategies. So you were doing this for a certain amount of time. And then you realize, well, okay, if we've been doing this just based off of, the knowledge that we have, what can we do if we, go seek out more knowledge? And you chose to do that in the form of coaching. What made you choose to go seek coaching as opposed to like just going out and, learning how to do it? Like what kind of shaped that decision? And then can you talk more so about like how that coaching, what that coaching actually did for you, and also what the investment was like to actually get coaching?
Do that. Yeah, it was really funny because, like I said, my husband and I, we keep it real with one another. We fight. Like we come up with a decision and we really argue over it, and then we decide like logically, once the emotion is down, what's the best decision. And he really was not a fan of financial coaching. He didn't want to see a personal finance person. He really believed like, why would we take our money and invest our money to make money? Like in his mind, for some reason, that didn't make sense. And I think that's where I realized that even though my husband's really, really responsible, we both know how to survive. We don't know anything about leveling up. We both come from families where people were just trying to get through. And he's learned really well how to hold down and be like responsible and keep that job. He's an artist with a government job. And so he knows what it means to like, be in the trenches and do what you're supposed to do. But when it comes to that leveling up, like, I'll give you an example. One of the things that Nasima, my financial coach, and I discovered when we were starting to do things with our investments is that he had only invested in bonds his entire time as a government employee. He had only invested in bonds. So there was a sense of like needing to be safe that I think both of us had. And that safety was going to keep us playing really small. The decision for me came when I realized that we're bringing in a good amount of money. Like when I looked at the kind of money we were making, and we have an opportunity moving here to Philadelphia, which happened because of family reasons. We really moved here to be supportive of our father-in-law who has dementia, and making that decision to move here and be more supportive of him completely changed our financial situation. We, living in Los Angeles was very expensive, and all of a sudden we moved here and we were able to live in family property for a while where we actually were not paying rent at all. So that opportunity of that money where I'm like, we're making money right now and we're doing really well. What would it look like for us to take this money and do even better? And when I thought about that and realized that I really didn't know how to make that happen, like that wasn't in my skill set and it really wasn't in his skill set, that's what made me really want to get financial coaching, or I was looking for people. And in fact, I feel like I looked off and on for about a year until I found somebody who I was like, oh, I think this would help us. So Nasima, who's financially intentional is her brand, is someone that I saw online. I saw her on Instagram. I was in her Facebook group, and I was in that for quite a bit of time. And she had a financial coaching package that involved a course. There was an original investment. I really don't remember the amount. It was a couple $100s. I know that there was a couple $100s of investment on the front end with a monthly fee for about 6 months. And, it was kind of my New Year's resolution for myself that I'm like, why wouldn't I want to know how to really level up this opportunity that we have right now? And I think that, again, happened at the government shutdown moment where it was, here we are making this good income, but anything could change at any moment. So how do we make ourselves more secure than what we are right now? That's really what led me into financial coaching. And what I got from taking Nasima's course is she really covered all the basics. So it reiterated everything I already knew about how to keep a budget. There were a couple of tweaks that she had in there that really actually helped me, like realizing that I could track my spending through apps. That's not something I had done in the past. I was always a pen and paper girl or an envelope girl. It was always very concrete. So finding out I could use an app on my phone to track my spending was very helpful. That actually has helped me because that taught me how a budget could be flexible. So I didn't come from a flexible budget. I came from a rigid budget that when I didn't do it right, now I'm mad at the world and how am I going to figure everything out? But with the app, I learned how to have a flexible budget that, hey, if I overspend in one area, I got to take away from here. It seems so simple, but that idea was not, it wasn't simple until I could see that idea for myself. So she taught me some things like that along the way. And then she, in her coaching program, once you deal with debt, once you deal with, your spending and what your spending habits are like with your budget, then she takes you to that next level of first looking at insurance, which I was already very invested in, and then next looking at investment. And when she talked about investment, this is when I learned about things like EFTs and index funds. Those are not things that I had any familiarity with at all. I had been balancing my own, 401 accounts and things like that with my jobs in the past. And I knew very little. All I knew is, what percent goes towards, what percents are going towards stocks versus what's going in bonds. That was probably like the level of knowledge I had with that. But she was able to provide information like EFTs and low cost funds that allowed me to see that there were other ways I could invest. And she also was a big fan of Roth IRAs. Even though I had listened to all kinds of financial gurus in the past, while I always heard about Roth IRAs, she made it concrete in a way that I was like, oh, I'm tripping if we're not investing in Roth IRAs right now. What am I doing? Yeah. And right then and there, we opened up, as soon as we became debt free, we both opened up Roth IRA accounts that are fully funded. So coaching allowed me to see what was possible and then gave me the exact steps that needed to be taken in order for me to do it. It also came with accountability. There was a coaching call. There were weekly coaching calls where I could ask her questions along the way. And at the end, when I finished my entire coaching program, there was a one-to-one that allowed us then to look at like how I had changed along the course and what my next steps were. So that's how coaching worked. And for me, it really, really worked. I thank Nasima very much. I actually had a chance to meet her at FinCon 19. I was able to attend this last year. And I am a fan. I think that if you don't have the knowledge, you're going to have to learn the knowledge. And sometimes you can learn the knowledge for free. Like, I listen to you guys. Thank you for what you're doing right now has helped people like me, because I sit and I listen to podcasts, and I've learned so much through podcasts for free. I've learned through books for free. I think what financial coaching does is it gives you the one-on-one experience, and it gives you the accountability.
No doubt.
Wow, that's amazing. I had never even knew like coaching was that in depth, to be honest. You know, the way coaching is perceived, like, or I guess the stigma of coaching from a lot of people that are against it. And this is kind of what they portray. They portray it as something that is like kind of like a ripoff, if you want to call it that. So I'm appreciative of that intel that you just gave, because I didn't know it actually was that in depth. I knew there was kind of the one-on-one aspect, which is what you're essentially, I think, paying for mostly. You're paying for someone's time. So that's kind of what, the investment really is. But I do want to get into some of the things that you said there. First, I wanted to ask, like, for our listeners, so they can probably do the same. What apps were you using to track your budget?
So I love F.I.R.E. That's the app that I will hang my hat on. Actually, I've heard of other ones, though, and I hear people talk about You Need a Budget, Track It. But for me, the app that's worked out very, very well is called F.I.R.E. It's actually a Dave Ramsey. It's from his line of products. It's completely free. You can like up your level. And I think if you up the level, it allows you to do things like track all your spending over the course of the year. So at the end of the year, you can see where everything was allocated. But at the completely free version of the app, you can set how much you can basically budget. And then every time you spend, you can add in how much you spent in what area. So not only are you able to see like where you've allocated all your money, you can actually track your expenses as you go, which allows you to see like how much you also have left to spend in every category of your spending as you move through the month.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So y'all definitely go check that app out. If y'all are looking for a budgeting app, it sounds like a great app. I might check it out myself too, just to see what it's about and see how it can help me too. Okay. So what we kind of want to do, I guess we're at 40 minutes, so we'll kind of try to wrap this up soon. But what we want to do is kind of get into more so your investments, and kind of where you are and what your portfolio looks like and how you're what your goals are with that. So I guess first, can you tell us what your net worth is right now and how, like what?
Yeah. Right now, my net worth is $120,000.
Okay, gotcha. Wow. Okay, so from 52,000 in debt to 120,000 in net worth. That's a great story. That'll probably be our title. But let's. I want to ask what is this made up of? What does your portfolio look like? I know you say you mentioned indexes, ETFs. All these things. I know you're house hacking, so that's a part of it now. We're definitely going to talk about that in a minute.
So we're baby. Yeah. We're baby house hackers. I feel that you guys probably know more. I'm listening to you. I was listening to the episode where you guys were talking to. Who were you talking to?
Oh, you talking about
it was Rich and Regular. Were you guys talking to Rich and Regular about?
It was Black Free.
Black. Yes, that's what it was. Yep. So I was just listening to that, and you guys blew my mind where I didn't realize you couldn't have more than one FHA loan at a time. So you just upped my knowledge of that. And then we had to like think about our plan for the next step after that. So yes, thank you for the knowledge. You guys know a little bit more, I think, than we do.
Yeah, we definitely want to, try to help people house hack, because I always say it's the single greatest financial decision you can make. And
yep.
It's going to change your life.
Yep. It already has. You're absolutely right. Wish I could have gotten into it even earlier than we did. Even though, if I'm honest with myself, in Los Angeles, house hacking wouldn't have been the same option as it is here. So it's, we're where we were supposed to be now. So
okay. Yeah, I say the same thing. I wish I'd have got into it earlier too.
Boy, listen, he want to be into it when he's 5 years old, I guess.
I'm asking. I'm looking at you. I'm like, okay,
my dude,
so
barely 20.
You want to start? 16.
In college.
Yeah.
I started in college too.
There are people who do that, and I see these young when I see these interviews with these young people who are house hacking in college. They're buying homes and renting out the room. I'm just like,
it's crazy.
Amazing and so smart. And that comes with I think financial literacy, that comes with financial literacy and you knowing that that's a possibility and realizing it.
Exactly. Because what 18-year-old is thinking of going to buy a house to rent out the rooms? That thought never crossed my head.
Never. One who I believe who has a family member who has done that kind of thing before and nudges them and says, hey, you know what you should do? And they really put them on that. You know, I think those are the ones who are doing it. So, yeah. All right. So the investments. All right. So I have a 401k with my job. My husband also has a TSP with his job that as a government employee. When I first got into coaching, I used a really great company called Bloom, BLOOO, 3 O's, M. And Bloom.com is something that if you're someone who knows nothing about investing and you want a more hands-off approach at a very low cost, they'll help support you with going right. You can put your accounts right in there and they'll help you allocate and meet whatever your goals are. So I used that first and did find that helpful. Now I'm becoming a little bit more independent because I'm learning how it works. So we start with those. We had a certain amount that we had already been building up over the course of our careers, and we just reallocated that where it's a little bit more aggressive than what it was in the past. We opened up 2 Roth IRA accounts, so one for each of us. We put money into those equally. This will be our first year where we both max out the amount you can contribute, which of course brings down how much we can be taxed on. So that's kind of one of the big things about Roth IRAs.
Real quick, can you explain to people what the Roth IRA is and how that works? Because I know it's really powerful.
It's powerful, and I'm going to test my own knowledge to be able to talk about it right now. So with Roth IRA, you can contribute to it. And when you contribute to it, not only is it not taxed. Now, I'm going to see if I've got this right. I believe the main thing that makes it powerful is that it's not taxed on the back end, meaning when it's time for you to take money out of it, it is not taxed at that time. The 401k, when you put money into your 401k, you're not taxed on the front end, but when it's time for you to take money out, you're taxed at whatever the tax rate is at that time. With the Roth IRA, this money, you're not taxed on the interest that it makes, and you're not at all taxed on when it's time to pull the money out. So whatever you have in your account is your real amount of money that you have and will not be taxed on at a later time. So that's what I know about Roth IRAs.
Yeah. So pretty much what she's saying is, you know, in the future, if you like, because whenever people are deciding between the 401k and the Roth IRA or the regular, you know, IRA or the Roth, the biggest thing, one of the deciding factors is, you know, what is the tax rate going to be at that time? Right? Because in the future, the tax rate could be different from what it is now. So if you anticipate, most likely it will probably be higher, right? So a lot of people will take that into consideration and say they'll just do a regular IRA so that they're taxed at today's rate rather than the future's rate. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different considerations that are taken into account. But for the most part, I would definitely say Roth IRA is a lot more powerful if you wanted to, you know, choose one of those. So sorry about that. Just you can go ahead, continue.
No, that's great. The other reason I love the Roth IRA is that, so unlike my 401k, which is something that's attached to my job, I have a certain flexibility around what can be invested, but it's not as flexible. The Roth IRAs that we have them with accounts that we have full ownership over, meaning we actually directly decide what that portfolio is. And that is when we learned about EFTs and Vanguard, VTIX, Vanguard's index funds. We're also really big fans of Our Rich Journey.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness. They are like, the knowledge is just, it's amazing. And the offer the knowledge that they've learned for free is just amazing. I've learned so much from watching their YouTube videos. So I actually learned about Vanguard index funds through them. And so we kind of put our eggs really heavily there for our Roth IRAs. We're maxing those out, meaning that at the end of the year, we will have put $6,000 in each one of those accounts, which we won't be taxed on, which brings down our tax rate for now, and it's money for our future. So, and it's growing. It's kind of crazy, actually, just watching the interest grow and be like, wow, That's money actually make. You hear people talk about these. It's your money, and you see your money. When you see your money actually growing, and you didn't have to work for it to grow, this is when this stuff becomes powerful for you. You're like, oh, okay. There's $150, literally like almost $150 more in those accounts just off interest. So anyway, I'm very excited about the idea of money making money. It blows my mind, and I'm very grateful that we get to watch that. So those are our investments. And then, like you mentioned, our next level of investment that we're in now is house hacking. So we saved, well, we got money that we had left over, so after paying off all our student loans, we still had cash left over from selling our home. That cash we kept in an account and let it grow a little bit more and looked around for the right house hack property. Once we found that became our down payment. So we continue to save and keep that liquid money there so that we're able to invest in property. So that's a part of our savings goal. And now we're starting to, we're paying our mortgage. So we have a tenant. We take the money that the tenant gives us. That goes towards our mortgage. We also are cash flowing a certain amount of that money. All of that. So we're at the point now that the money that they give us, that the tenant gives us, goes towards our mortgage. We also pay towards the mortgage. We're basically doubling actually our mortgage, because our goal is to be out of that FHA in 2 years. Oh. So our goal is to be out of our FHA in 2 years, which, thank you for giving me the knowledge that we're not going to be able to just run out in a year and get that FHA loan, because I think that's what we were under the impression we'd be able to do.
Yeah. And one thing I want to comment on that too, because I'm actually in the process of I haven't even told Marlon about this yet, but I'm getting my second house hack right now. I just got approved with another lender, just because I found out about a program that they offer. If y'all don't know, there are a lot of down payment assistance programs out here that actually will cover a lot of the down payment for you if you make. And you'll be surprised what the income restrictions are. Like, you would think they're like extremely low, but the income restrictions are pretty high for a lot of these down payment assistance programs. So if, once you're ready for that, second house hack or third house hack or whatever, you can even use a down payment assistance program if you wanted to do that. Because I don't want to spend my money. I want someone else to spend their money and let me get the house. Why would I want to spend my money when someone else could spend their money? So there's things out there called they're HFAs. They're I think they're housing something agencies, but they are like each state has an HFA, and they pretty much help people that want to buy houses put money down on down payments. And you would think it's only available to like first time home buyers, and it is, but there's different levels to first time home buyers, right? First time home buyer could mean to them it means someone that hasn't bought a house in the last 3 years. But you can own a house and be a first-time home buyer. So it's weird. So I'm still going to be able to keep my first house hack, which I'm in now, while I go use the DPA program to get this second house hack. That's right. So that's what I'm planning on doing.
I'll be following up with that. Sorry.
Yep. Okay, so I have one more question before we wrap this thing up, because I know it's getting kind of toward the end right now. But I think it's safe to say that you've been hit with the passive income bug now, where you've seen definitely the benefits of what it can do for you. So with your house hacking, I got to dig into that for just a little bit. What is your goals with that, as far as you saving up financially? And then what's your ultimate goals as far as financially for yourself and maybe for your children once you get to that point?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because we're in the place where house hacking has changed our entire perspective. We were in a place where we were really kind of buyer movement, save 50% of our income, go real hard in the paint with investments, allow that in 10 years. We were looking at a 10 to 12 year being ready to retire early goal. And when we got into property and we started looking at property at the power of cash flow that's coming in, we really had to sit down and talk about what do we really want? Mm-hmm. And so our current goal has to do with bringing in enough money from our investment properties that we can first level is getting one of us out of a full-time job. We're happy to just have one move out of that. We're in a situation where I am in a field that I love. I'm passionate about my work. I have no desire to leave my career. And actually, I just continue. I've recently, like, I'm leveling up. Like, it's ramping up in my career. So for me, I'm not at a point where I want to retire early. I'm at a point where I want to get all that I can get out of what I'm getting from my job. Whereas my husband, being a government employee, and he's been a government employee now for 17 years, it would be at 20 years, he could actually retire and maintain his benefits. So what happens is at 20 years, if he retires, he will, when he does actually hit the age of 62, have benefits for life at that point. So for him, there's a goal around getting to that point. And once he's at that point, being ready to move away from his full-time job, where he can be a full-time, what his career is he's an artist. He does storyboarding, he does children's illustration, but those things don't provide you that consistent, steady income. So for us, the goal around property investment is to really replace his full-time income with our investments that we make. The next level of goal is we've actually had a lot of problems getting pregnant. We've been trying to get pregnant for a couple of years. We've gone through in vitro. Very blessed to have a job that had great benefits that allowed us to not have to pay much to go through that journey. But now that we've done that a few times, we realize that for us, it's probably going to be adoption. And so with adoption, we would be really, it's important for us to save for that. So again, we don't want to go into debt trying to have a baby. Like, it's a little crazy. Like, if you ever have a chance, I suggest you guys learn more. It's just kind of crazy, the journey of infertility and finances and what that takes people on. Because there's a lot of people out there in debt behind adoption, in debt behind IVF, because these things cost a lot of money. So we want to save up where we have that cushion of just cash that we need, that we'll know we'll be able to adopt in a comfortable way. So those are our current goals. Those are our more short-term financial goals. Getting him out of his full-time job where he is able to be that full-time artist that he wants to be, while still maintaining our same lifestyle through property investments, and then saving to have the cash that we need to start the family we want. That also puts us in a situation where he will be able to be at home. It's important to us that if we bring a child into our family, like, now we're in a situation where we could actually have someone home. That's not something that would have been available to us a few years ago. But now that we're in a situation where we could have that, we would love to be able to raise our child, in a way that someone is home.
It's so good to hear that story, because we can see that you have a plan. You have a vision in mind, and that's allowing you to be able to backtrack and say what needs to be done in order to get to this ultimate goal point. So you basically are starting with the end in mind and laying down the steps that it would take in order to get there. So I think was great, just hearing your whole story and hearing how you've come from payday loans up till now, where you're just killing it as far as like your mindset with financially, and where you will ultimately end up. You're going to go very far. So I can't wait to follow you on your journey.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully we could, have you back on the show once you got some properties or, whatever it is under your belt, and, we could interview you again and see how far you've gone by that point. So,
Yeah. I thank you guys. This was really great. I really love the show. I'm a fan. I'm going to keep liking, sharing. I love what you're doing, putting this message out here. Like I said, I'm one of those who needed to be listening to a podcast like this, just to know, and this is something I didn't say about coaching. Part of what was powerful about coaching is realizing that people like me, people who look like me, people who come from families, maybe like my family, can develop wealth. And, that not only is it okay to do that, but it's absolutely possible to do it. Mm-hmm. And you guys are being living examples of that. And your podcast is going to help a lot of people. And I'm sure it already is.
Last thing I'll say to wrap it up, if you don't come from a rich family, make sure a rich family comes from you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're going to say. This was super fun. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you later. Bye, Krystal.
Bye.
Man, that was a great episode. That was definitely a lot of info in there to soak in. So Marlon, what'd you think of it?
I mean, I can't say any more. Like I said in the very beginning, make sure you had your pen and paper out. She was spitting facts the whole episode. So I hope that y'all are able to take some of the actionable steps that she laid out and apply it to your own life, especially those who are just graduating college with a student loan that they already have. be sure to take the steps that she was taking so that you don't make the same mistakes that she made, and be able to apply it to your own life and be able to build your way towards your financial future a lot earlier.
Facts. Well, that's it for this episode of the Money Monopolizers podcast. New episodes will be released every Thursday and will be available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Just search Money Monopolizers wherever you listen to podcasts. We hope you learned something of value today. If you did, we'd appreciate it if you rated us and left us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also find out more info about us on Twitter @The Monopolizers or on IG @Money Monopolizers. We post informative content on there that'll keep you engaged. So check that out and share them posts. But until then, get out of here.
You've been listening to the Money Monopolizers podcast, helping you take control of your financial destiny. To learn more about how you can be in control of your money, visit moneymonopolizers.com. We'll catch you next time when Alex and Marlon share more personal finance and wealth creation tips with you. Now it's time to take action.